Stepmom framed me for theft. My own family stole my future. Hey everyone. Before we jump into today's story, just a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, helps support the channel, and ensures you never miss out on more incredible stories. Alright, let's get started. I used to believe that family was a bond that couldn't be broken. That no matter what happened, the people who raised you, who saw you grow up, would stand by your side. I learned the hard way that trust is fragile, and when it shatters, the pieces cut deeper than anything else. 5 years ago, my life as I knew it was ripped apart. My name is Ellie Parker, and I was just 18 when my stepmother, Lena, accused me of something I never did. The accusation wasn't just any petty crime, it was theft. Not just any theft. Stealing her jewelry, her most prized possessions. It sounds ridiculous now, but back then, it was the kind of scandal that ruined lives. And it ruined mine. It didn't matter that I had never so much as touched her expensive rings and necklaces. It didn't matter that I had no reason to steal anything. It didn't matter that I had spent years being the straight-A student, the responsible one, the one who never gave my parents a reason to doubt me. None of that mattered. What mattered was that Lena was good at playing the victim. And she played the role so well that my entire family, my father, my stepfamily, even my own mother, believed her without question. She didn't just accuse me. She planted evidence. I'll never forget the day it all went down. I was at my dad's house, and she came storming in, red-faced and trembling, holding up an empty jewelry box like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial. My dad, Grant Parker, looked at me with this expression I had never seen before. Not anger, but disappointment. You stole from your own family, Ellie? His voice was quiet, but the weight of those words crushed me. I stammered, what? No, I would never. But it didn't matter. Not when Lena had proof. She found a couple of her rings stuffed into my bedside drawer. A pawn shop receipt appeared in my backpack. Something I had never seen before in my life. She cried, saying I betrayed her trust. That she had tried so hard to be a good stepmother. My dad didn't hesitate. He took my college fund, the money I had worked my entire life toward, and gave it to her as compensation. And then, they cut me off. The thing about being abandoned is that you don't realize how alone you are until you truly have nothing. It's not an immediate, crushing weight, it's a slow, suffocating realization that creeps in day by day. One moment, you think things might still work out. Maybe they'll change their minds. Maybe someone will come to their senses. And then, suddenly, it hits you like a freight train. No one is coming to save you. I lost everything overnight. One day, I was Ellie Parker, a soon-to-be college freshman with dreams and a future. The next, I was a pariah, a girl without a home, without a family, without a plan. I had to drop out of my dream college before I even started because without that fund, tuition was impossible. My mother, who should have been my last lifeline, looked me in the eye and said she couldn't go against my father's decision. That maybe, this was a lesson I needed to learn. A lesson. As if being thrown out, humiliated, and left with nothing was some kind of moral education I had signed up for. So I learned, but not in the way they thought I would. I learned what it meant to fight for survival. I learned what it meant to swallow my pride and accept help from people who owed me nothing. I learned that loneliness was not just an absence of people but a state of being. A shadow that clung to me through every sleepless night, every empty stomach, every whispered rumor. I couch-surfed between friends' places, careful never to overstay my welcome. I worked 2 jobs just to keep my head above water, waiting tables during the day, doing delivery shifts at night. There was no break, no moment of peace, just constant movement, like a shark that knew stopping meant drowning. It was humiliating at first, having people from my old school recognize me. I'd see the way they glance over, the hushed voices, the barely concealed smirks. Isn't that Ellie? Didn't she get caught stealing? The words weren't always said to my face. But they didn't have to be. I could feel them in the way people avoided my eyes, the way their conversations would drop when I walked by. Shame curled in my stomach, but I refused to let it break me. If no one else was going to believe in me, I had to believe in myself. I learned to survive on less sleep. I learned to budget meals down to the last cent. I learned that kindness from strangers could feel warmer than the love I had once known from my own family. But most of all, I learned to let go. I didn't have time to cry over lost family. I didn't have the luxury of mourning a life that no longer belonged to me. Regret was a burden I couldn't afford to carry. Every time I felt the weight of their betrayal pressing down, I reminded myself, I had to survive. Years passed, and somehow, I built a new version of myself from the wreckage they left behind. I worked my way up in a corporate office, proving my worth without a degree, without a single handout from the people who had abandoned me. I carved out a life, built my own financial security, and created a world where I didn't need them. And then, just when I thought I was finally free, they came back. It started with an email, then texts, then phone calls. At first, I thought it was some glitch, some mistake. Maybe spam or an old contact resurfacing. But no, it was them. My father, my mother, even my stepfamily, people who had vanished from my life without hesitation, were suddenly desperate to talk. The same people who had left me to fend for myself, who had believed the worst about me without a second thought, now wanted to reach out. I ignored them. What else was there to say? There was nothing they could offer me that I hadn't already clawed out of the world for myself. But the calls didn't stop. The emails kept coming. I began to feel a gnawing irritation rather than sadness or nostalgia. At first, I convinced myself it was some cruel joke. Maybe Lena had spun another lie. Maybe they had found another way to pin something else on me. But then, the messages became longer, more urgent. Words like, "We need to talk," "I'm sorry," "We made a terrible mistake" started appearing. And then my father showed up at my apartment. It had been years since I had seen him in person. I almost didn't recognize him. The man who once towered over me with unwavering authority now looked smaller somehow, his shoulders less rigid, his expression no longer hard but worn down. His eyes, once filled with disappointment, now carried something else. Shame. For the first time since that day, he didn't look at me like I was a disgrace. He looked at me like I was a stranger. He hesitated before speaking. His voice softer than I had ever heard. "Ellie, I need to talk to you." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, my heartbeat steady. I had imagined this moment for years, how I would feel, what I would say. But now that it was happening, I felt nothing but a hollow sense of detachment. Why now? That was the only question that mattered. I expected some excuse, some flimsy reasoning to justify what they had done. But what I got was worse. Because we were wrong. About everything. Lena had been caught. Not because of an investigation. Not because anyone had tried to clear my name. No, the truth only came out by accident. My father had been using her laptop one day when his own had broken. He hadn't been snooping. He hadn't been looking for any answers. But fate had other plans. He accidentally opened the wrong email account and saw it, a message from a jewelry dealer. The dealer was following up, asking if Lena wanted to buy back a piece she had sold years ago. A piece my father recognized immediately. The same piece of jewelry I had been accused of stealing. The same one they had condemned me over, the one that had destroyed my future. At first, my father didn't want to believe it. He convinced himself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the dealer had confused Lena for someone else. But when he confronted her, the lie unraveled faster than she could rebuild it. She tried to deny it. She tried to cry. She tried to spin it in every way she could. But there was no covering the truth. She had framed me. And she had done it on purpose. I watched my father struggle to meet my gaze as he recounted it all. How Lena had spun stories about me from the beginning. How she had planted the evidence. How she had sold her own jewelry and let me take the fall. How they had all swallowed her lies without question. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt relief. But all I could think about was how none of them had ever questioned it before. Not when I begged. Not when I cried. Not when I lost everything. The truth had been within their grasp for years. Yet it took a random email for them to finally see me for who I really was. And now they wanted to make things right. Suddenly, my family wanted to fix things. The people who had once turned their backs on me, who had cast me out like I was disposable, now wanted redemption. It was almost laughable, almost. If it weren't so infuriating, so devastating, so insulting, I might have found some bitter amusement in the irony. They begged for forgiveness. My father, once so certain of my guilt, now stood in front of me, stripped of the unwavering authority he once carried. The same man who had ripped my future away with barely a second thought now wanted to rebuild our relationship. He had kicked Lena out, filed for divorce, told me that he had made a terrible mistake. As if that changed anything. Even my mother, the woman who had chosen silence over defending me, who had left me stranded when I needed her the most, was suddenly desperate to make amends. She told me she regretted it. She told me she thought about me every single day. She told me she should have fought harder, should have stood by me, should have questioned the absurdity of it all. "Ellie, we just want to be a family again." Family. The word felt foreign now. Like something I had once known but had long since forgotten. Like something I had outgrown. Because where were they when I was alone? Where were they when I had nowhere to sleep? When I counted every dollar in my pocket? When I had to pretend I wasn't starving just to keep my dignity intact? Where were they when I needed just one person to believe in me? They had lived comfortably, never once questioning whether they had done the right thing. They had laughed, celebrated holidays, carried on as if nothing had happened, as if my absence was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Meanwhile, I had been clawing my way through a life they had forced me into. And now that the truth had surfaced, now that it was safe for them to admit they had been wrong, they wanted absolution. They wanted to rewrite history, to act as if those years of silence, of neglect, of abandonment could be erased with a few apologies. But life didn't work that way. I stood there, listening to their pleas, their desperate attempts to undo the past. And for a fleeting moment, I wondered what it would feel like to give in, to let them back in, to believe even for a second that things could go back to the way they were. But then I remembered who they had been when it mattered. I remembered the loneliness, the hunger, the sheer exhaustion of fighting every single day just to exist. I remembered that they hadn't lifted a finger to help me until it suited them. I remembered that if they had truly cared, they never would have let me go in the first place. So I told them no. They didn't stop trying. At first, the messages were sporadic. An email here, a voicemail there, a text that simply read, "Please, just hear us out." I deleted them without reading. But then the desperation escalated. The texts turned into long-winded apologies, riddled with excuses I had no desire to hear. The calls became more frequent, my phone vibrating relentlessly at all hours. When I stopped answering, they tried a different tactic, using other people. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly popped up in my inbox. Old family friends reached out, telling me that my parents missed me, that they regretted everything, that I should give them a chance to make it right. Make it right? What did that even mean? Would they give me back the years I lost? The opportunities one was robbed of? Would they erase the nights I went to bed hungry, the moments of humiliation? The shame I carried for a crime I never committed? Then came the offer. My father sent a check. A neatly typed letter accompanied it, words carefully crafted to sound sincere. To sound like he understood what he had done. He wanted to pay for the college education he had stolen from me. It was more than just money, it was an attempt to rewrite history. To undo the damage with a single gesture. But I wasn't the same person I was 5 years ago. Once upon a time, I would have craved their approval, yearned for their acceptance. I would have bent over backward for even a sliver of their love. But that version of me was gone. She had died the day they turned their backs on me. And in her place stood someone who had learned that survival came not from seeking validation but from forging strength in solitude. They had their chance, and they threw it away. Forgiveness, they said, was the path to healing. But what about justice? What about consequences? Why was it that the people who did the most damage always seemed to think a simple apology could erase the wreckage they left behind? I didn't owe them my forgiveness. I didn't owe them a place in my life. For 5 years I had been nothing to them. A shadow. A mistake they had brushed aside without a second thought. And now, because the truth had clawed its way to the surface, they suddenly wanted me back? No, they had 5 years to see the truth. 5 years to question, to investigate, to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had condemned an innocent person. But they hadn't. They had been comfortable in their ignorance, satisfied with their cruelty. And now they would have to live with it. I don't know if I'll ever forgive them. Maybe one day, maybe never. But what I do know is this: forgiveness is not owed, it is earned. And they have done nothing to earn it. For years, I waited for them to realize the truth. I spent nights wondering if they would ever question their actions, if they would ever look back and feel the weight of what they had done. And now that the truth has forced its way into the open, they want absolution. They want to pretend that an apology is enough, that regret is enough. But regret doesn't erase the past. It doesn't undo the damage. I built my life without them. I found strength where they saw weakness. I survived not because of them, but in spite of them. And now I stand here, not as the person they tried to break, but as someone who rose from the wreckage they left behind. They will have to live with their choices. With the knowledge that their absence shaped me more than their presence ever did. That their betrayal carved something unshakable in me, something that cannot be undone with mere words. Their guilt is theirs to carry, not mine. Because now, I am free. Truly free. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? Do you believe forgiveness is always necessary? Or are some betrayals too deep to mend? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories that dive deep into raw emotions, resilience, and life's unexpected twists, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. Because trust me, there's always another story waiting to be told.